Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Eldredge. I'm a technology manager at the U.S. Department of Energy's Solar Energy Technologies Office. And I'm really excited to talk to this group today. Unfortunately, I can't be there to actually join you on the day of. So I'd like to thank the organizers for making a recorded talk possible. I'm here to talk a little bit about the intersection of pollinator habitat and solar energy, which is something of significant interest to my office, but maybe a little bit different from what people here are talking about. So first of all, a little bit about my office, just to be clear. The Solar Energy Technologies Office has the mission of advancing and deploying solar technology in support of an equitable transition to a decarbonized energy system by 2050, starting by decarbonizing power by 2035. So, we're working to advance technology to make solar affordable and accessible, to support grid reliability, and support job growth, manufacturing, and the circular economy. One thing I want to emphasize about our office is that we're not a regulatory agency. Our work is really focused on building out the technology and funding applied research. And so, we're not here to set the rules about what solar is or what solar should do. We're here to make things possible. And we're interested in that because solar energy is one of the fastest growing energy sources in America. In 2020, solar PV was about 40% of all the new capacity installed in the United States, beating wind, beating natural gas. And over the past 5 years, it's been about a third of new capacity additions, and now supplies about 3% of the nation's electricity. So although it's still a small portion of our energy supply, it's growing very, very quickly. In early September 2021, we released a document called the Solar Future Study. The Solar Future Study looks at projected solar deployment under a range of favorable policy and technology conditions to try to chart a pathway to providing solar electricity up to 45% of total US electricity by 2050. Again, that's up from 3% in 2020. As a side goal, this scenario also achieves 95% decarbonization of the power sector by 2035. We actually want 100% decarbonization by 2035, but that last 5% has a lot more technical uncertainty in it, so we didn't want to focus the modeling entirely on that. As you can see, we're talking about hundreds of gigawatts of new solar energy coming online off of a baseline of about 80 gigawatts today. So it's a big expansion. And this brings us maybe to the pollinator's point. This means a lot of land use. We estimate about 7.5 acres per megawatt for utility scale PV. That's a pretty rough estimate, by the way. I wouldn't take it as gospel. It depends on things like latitude and type of hardware and things like that. And that means that under some of our scenarios, we're seeing usages of up to 6 million acres of land by 2035, as much as 10 million by 2050. That's larger than the state of Maryland. It's a lot of land to use. Now, whether or not this is a problem kind of depends on whether you want to take an optimistic or pessimistic view. It's not a lot of land by sort of percentage of total surface area. It compares very favorably to other types of land uses like paved roads or even the disturbed areas that might be suitable for deploying solar onto. But it's still a lot of land, and it's going to be concentrated in certain areas, and local communities will be impacted, and we expect there will be some friction there. So that friction really comes about a lot more, or is perhaps enhanced by some of the traditional means of solar development. So we're talking about removing existing vegetation, stripping and grading the topsoil, discouraging habitat for animals or wildlife, and really focusing on minimizing your costs. So you don't want to mow, you don't really want to invest in vegetation management. You'll spray a bunch of herbicides and then mow as much as you have to keep the plants off the panels. And the question our office has been asking for some time now is, how can we do better here to make solar a better partner in land use? And we talk a lot about this in terms of agrivoltaics. So agrivoltaics to us is the combined production of crops, livestock, or pollinator habitat with solar energy. So not just next to the panels, but sort of around them, underneath them, in adjacent to them. So sometimes you hear this called co-location or dual use or ag PV. There's a lot of different words for this, but I'll call it agrivoltaics for the time being, and I'm going to focus, of course, on the pollinator part. So pollinator-friendly solar is solar energy infrastructure where these fields have flowers or grasses planted within them that intentionally support pollinator habitat. And our hope is that this can provide significant benefits to surrounding ag communities as well as to the pollinators themselves. I mean, we can be restoring native grasslands potentially to the degree that it's compatible with the solar facility. And it's extremely picturesque, as you can see from some of these real world installations. So when we talk about benefits, we really want to make this to be a win-win proposition for both the solar producer and the pollinator ecosystem. So for the ecosystems, we can preserve or even restore native habitat. Some of these solar fields might not have been green fields beforehand. They could have been agricultural land or just post-industrial land or something like that. It promotes stormwater infiltration. So there are some stormwater drainage questions that arise around solar energy, water coming off the panels, for instance. And there's evidence that we're gathering that these native vegetation schemes can sort of promote soil stability and prevent erosion. Now, on the solar side, there's a few different ways to think about the benefits, and they really do require more research to bear out, honestly, but that's what we're working on. We're hoping that integrated vegetation management can reduce operating expenses by saying, hey, we're going to actually build a sort of self-regulating ecosystem down here that can help reduce your expenses. We're hoping that the microclimate can improve production. And so what's important about that is that solar energy produces more energy when it's cool. So heat basically makes the solar panels less efficient. So you want to try to keep them cool if you can. And there's growing evidence that growing plants underneath them is a good way to do that. And it kind of avoids these heat island effects you would get if you just had sort of gravel underneath them, for instance. And then finally, there's this sense of better land use might aid social acceptance. So as we're building these out, we're hoping that we can help solar be an active participant, an active partner to the communities that they're being sited in. This is a map that Argonne National Lab made, where you can see that they mapped out how much pollinator-dependent agriculture was within 1.5 kilometers of solar facilities. So there's lots of this, especially California, North Carolina, Massachusetts, but across the country. And the nature of how this map is that as we deploy more solar, there'll only be more of this. So already we think that we see a significant upside for agricultural communities in pollinator solar. The policy landscape is really starting to respond to the state level. The most common instrument you see here are pollinator-friendly solar scorecards that are used to evaluate whether a site is pollinator-friendly. State law has officially sanctioned these in 6 states. There's a lot of other states that have produced these from their state agencies or from their land grant universities, but maybe haven't codified them in any way. These are often being used to guide zoning or land use decisions or incentives. So for instance, I think Massachusetts is one where there's an incentive for if you build a solar plant in such a way that it is compatible with this pollinator habitat. Our own projects on this are, there are a few of them. One is Inspire, which is kind of our agrivoltaics flagship. That's the National Renewable Energy Lab. And it really builds out a network of research sites, companies, and universities that are interested in site preparation and solar energy. That doesn't just mean pollinators, it also means sort of crop agrivoltaics, grazing, and sort of native vegetation more broadly. They just finished their second round of funding that was called Inspire 2.0. You can see they had sites all across the country. They were doing all kinds of analysis of the ecological services that different ground cover options provide and trying to quantify what is it like to try to establish and evaluate these pollinator habitats. So especially I think in Minnesota are some of their largest research sites here. And I really recommend you check out their website. If you just type in Inspire NREL, it should come up on Google. They have a lot of resources available in this area. They're about to start their 3rd round. Inspire 3.0 is going to continue evaluating site preparation and agrivoltaic settings in many sites and conditions. For pollinator habitat and solar, we're going to be doing ecosystem services analyses in Georgia, Minnesota, Idaho, Oregon, and California. There's also going to be kind of more broad study, I think, of the soil science and conservation impacts of solar, which will be really important and have a lot of relevance for pollinators, even if the sites they're studying are not pollinator focused. We have another project at the University of Illinois at Chicago that is working to understand kind of the large scale questions around solar energy and pollinators. So a lot of the evidence we have so far comes from smaller test sites or like portions of a solar plant that have been given over to pollinators for evaluation. But the industry still needs to kind of be convinced that this can work at large scale sites. So for the purpose of this project, that means 10 megawatts or larger. So if you remember my rough conversion, that's 70, 80 acres maybe. But we want to figure out, what are the costs here, what are the benefits, and what are the risks to operations? So UIC is going to study what does this do to PV performance, what does this do to the cost of installing and operating these plants, and how much ecological benefit is there. They're going to be producing things like implementation manuals, cost benefit calculators, a tool for helping you select seed mixes, and sort of more advanced pollinator scorecards. So this project, it does actually have a start date. It shouldn't say under negotiation, but they're getting about $2.5 million to do this over the course of the next 3 years. We have a lot of open questions in pollinator solar. We don't know what the long-term impacts of solar energy are on soil. We don't know what seed mixes to use. We don't know what's going to happen when we decommission these plants. We don't know how upfront costs compare to long-term benefits, and we don't know how to co-optimize so we're making both pollinator habitat and solar energy at the same time a smart way. There's a lot we don't know, and we would love to work with any of you. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to collaborate or learn more, please feel free to contact me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address this group.